our little presentation for the day. Good morning, welcome everyone. If everyone could see our presentation right here. Welcome. Okay. All right, we are 1 minute in and we have almost 20 people here. So I am going to begin the presentation by welcoming you all to the Mainline Chamber of Commerce's nonprofit roundtable. My name is Nicole Stevenson. I'm the director of the Society of Professional Women program, as well as our nonprofit roundtable program for the Chamber. And I want to welcome you all to this presentation with Jeffrey Klein today from 9 Dots. He is the founder, president, and CEO, and he will be sharing with us for our toolkit this year the art of visual communication and a few other things I think he told me today about white space. I wanted to also welcome our sponsors and thank them for allowing us to bring this presentation even during the pandemic through our virtual service. So those sponsors are Dunleavy and Associates, Enterprise Fleet Management, and Fiduciary Trust International, which was formerly known as Pennsylvania Trust. And so before we continue today, I'm going to allow them to share a little bit more about their companies and why they support the nonprofit roundtable program. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to ask you to unmute Melanie. There we go.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. So as Nicole said, my name is Melanie Ruff. I am an account manager with Enterprise Fleet Management. Now, most of you are probably familiar with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So I always like to make it a point that we are not the same company. We are sister companies, but we operate as separate entities. So Enterprise Fleet Management, we are a full service vehicle management company, and we work with companies all over the tri-state area in all different industries. And our goal is to provide consultative services. And specifically for the Philadelphia Fleet Management Office, we service roughly 250 clients, like I said, in Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And 20% of those are nonprofits. And as we work with our nonprofits, our goal is to really be an extension of their business and a true partner. And the number one way that we do this is by overseeing and keeping operating expenses low. And for nonprofits that are on this call today that run a fleet of vehicles, you know that maintenance, fuel, and risk management, insurance, those are expensive items. And so we can come in and really show you more efficient ways to run your fleet to lower those costs. Ultimately, what we want to do is create sustaining, long-lasting relationships while making sure that you really do have an excellent client experience. Combined with rental car and fleet management, we manage over 2 million vehicles on the road. And so with that infrastructure and experience, we're really able to see that within the first year of partnering with Enterprise, our nonprofits really do see an upwards of 20% of savings in their fleet expenses within that first year. And COVID has really given us a run for our money, but it really has strengthened a lot of our partnerships that we have with our nonprofits, because every dollar counts, every cent counts, and we know that. So we're able to come in and really see where we're able to save some money during this unprecedented time. So thank you for your time today, and you're in for a fantastic webinar, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Awesome. So now I guess we will go to Fiduciary Trust, which is James. James, I'm going to ask you to unmute and share a few words.
Hi, thanks, Nicole. Yes, as you said, we are now Fiduciary Trust International, formerly known as Pennsylvania Trust. So, for us, we've been a part of the Radnor community since 1986 as a firm. What we are is a trust company and asset management firm, and we are skilled investors of customized portfolios. So first and foremost, what we do is we take care of the investment assets of not-for-profits. But what we also do is we provide extra services on the advising front. So whether it be tax advice or philanthropic fundraising, things like that. So we're part of the community, and we're really glad to be here and support the non-for-profit community in the main line.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. And last but certainly not least, Dunleavy and Associates, Marta.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marta Rubin Kiesling. I'm an engagement team leader with Dunleavy and Associates. Dunleavy is delighted to sponsor programs with Mainline Chamber of Commerce. We're a one-stop professional services firm founded by Nancy Dunleavy in 2001, partnering with nonprofits and the foundations and companies that support them. And for almost 20 years, we've been serving nonprofits in the greater Philadelphia region and beyond. And we've probably worked with many of you who are participating in the Zoom. We specialize in margin-focused initiatives, including fundraising, feasibility studies, and capital campaigns, organizational assessment, strategic planning and implementation, which is especially important now with COVID, executive search and contracted interim leadership, board training, virtual and signature events, communications and PR, and marketing and relationship cultivation. And storytelling is part of what we do every day with our clients. We help our clients create compelling case statements, social media campaigns, and other fundraising messaging to engage donors and the broader community. So we're especially delighted to be sponsoring today's session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marta. Really appreciate you being here. And before we also get started with the program, we love to offer additional opportunities to our nonprofits through not only our nonprofit roundtable, but through our Society Professional Women program. We feature and highlight nonprofits and offer them a chance to have a platform and also receive a donation. And we also have a really special program called Leadership Mainline, which features a nonprofit and works on a project for them. So we have Dana Riker-Jackson, who's our facilitator at the Mainline Chamber of Commerce, with us today to share a little bit more about that process. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, Dana. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Dana Riker-Jackson here, and I am happy and really honored to be able to represent and facilitate the Leadership Mainline program, which has been, I'm actually going into the 5th year of facilitating this program. And the nonprofits that we have worked with it's been such a rewarding experience, and it's an opportunity. And especially now, I can't imagine a time where it's more appropriate than now, where the Leadership Mainline class, which is comprised of leaders from corporations and nonprofits throughout our region. And the reach is actually going to probably be a little bit further this year, since it will be done virtually, given our COVID situation. And it's an opportunity for a nonprofit to apply to have this Leadership Mainline class help you with a specific project that helps to further your mission. And even now, it can be a project just to help you survive throughout this whole situation that we're currently find ourselves in. So we are looking for nonprofits to start applying. If we haven't quite updated the website yet with this year's or 2021 information, so if you would like to learn more about how the Leadership Mainline class can become almost like a free project team on a specific project that you need help with, especially during these times, it starts in January, where the help would start probably kicking in at around February of 2021. So if you're interested, please put my email in the chat once we get back into the webinar mode, and or Nicole knows how to reach me. She can send it out to all of you, and we would really be honored and would really love, especially now, to provide an opportunity for support during these times. So thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Dana. So now before we get started and bring you in, Jeffrey, I just want to do a few more housekeeping items. So I just wanted to let everyone know that you could always check for our events on mlcc.org, or you could reach out to myself at nstevenson, at mlcc.org, and my email address, and I can put you in touch with the appropriate people, like Dana said, or any of our staff members. And right now for today, we're going to have Jeffrey do his presentation. We are going to try a polling feature for the first time today. And then, of course, at the end of the presentation, we're going to have the question and answer portion of the program, which you can use the chat function to talk with each other, share resources, and ask questions, but your question might get lost during the program at the end. So I ask you to submit the questions to the Q&A box. And then we will also allow you to talk and during the question and answer program. So if you want to raise your hand, there's a little button that says raise your hand. Then I can go to the attendee scroll and I can actually give you a voice so that you can ask your question. If you prefer to do it anonymously, then you can use that Q&A box. So Jeffrey, I want to welcome you today. Hello, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hello, Nicole.
Hi, and so communication is huge. It was huge before the pandemic. So I can imagine that maybe some things have changed with communication during what's been going on. So I'm really interested in learning from you today, and I will be here on the back end if you need me. So go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. Thank you all for coming. And Nicole, thank you for having me. And to the Chamber and to all the sponsors, thank you very much. I'm excited to share some thoughts I have on communication. We're going to talk a little bit about story, and we're also going to talk a little bit about visual. I mean, that's what we're here. But I want to start this presentation by telling you a lot about why story matters, because from my perspective, the most effective way to communicate is by telling a story. And then we're going to go into how you can communicate better by telling visual stories. So with it being the art of communication, I figure I'd start with a story. So this really is about the why story matters. And I often refer to this as kind of the brain story, because this really shows how our brains are hardwired for story. And being nonprofits, you have these amazing stories, and these are the best ways to communicate. So here's the story. There's a neuroscientist named Professor Uri Hassan, and he did some research while he was at Princeton. And Professor Hassan is really an expert in brain chemistry and communication. And he had this kind of burning question, which was, how does our brain behave depending on what we put into it? So another way of looking at that is like, how does an audience respond depending on the input that they receive? And his research led him to the conclusion that communication is really all about brain chemistry. And here's the experiment he did. He wanted to test the difference on an audience depending if they got information, sort of facts and figures, data, features and benefits, versus the audience who was told a story which included those information. So the first group that was just told information, the facts, figures, data points, what some people refer to as death by PowerPoint, two parts of their brain activated, the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. Now, these two parts of your brain are important. They're, in fact, what you need to decode the meaning so you can understand the words that someone is saying. But the group that was told a story, their brain acted very differently. Not only did the Broca's and the Wernicke's area operate, but so did all the other parts of the brain that audience would use if they were experiencing the story themselves. There's a phenomenon that he discovered, which is called neurocoupling. And this means that the brain activity of a speaker and the brain activity of the listener are mirroring one another. So that if I were to tell you a story about me kicking a ball, your motor cortex would activate. If I told you a story about the sweet smell of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies, your olfactory cortex would activate. Now, there's also an increase in two hormones, cortisol and oxytocin. And if you want to put in the chat, does anyone know what either of those are, cortisol or oxytocin? These are two pretty powerful hormones that we have. I'm just going to check and see if anyone wants to participate. We can make this a little interactive. I don't see a lot of people who, either it's too early in the morning to be thinking about chemicals, but these two hormones, mood enhancers, thank you, Dana. Yes, I've heard of oxytocin, but I don't know what it is. Oh, well, Phil, you're going to find out in about 5 seconds. So oxytocin is known as the stress hormone, and oxytocin is the stress hormone, cortisol is the stress hormone, and oxytocin is the love hormone. I kept saying the oxytocin when it was cortisol. So we've heard of cortisol. It's one of those things. It's that flight or fight, and it's really important in communication because we want to get people's attention. So it makes you alert. When someone says, "I want to tell you a story," your cortisol rises and you start to pay attention. And then obviously you must have heard about the importance of connecting on an emotional level with your audience. And so the increase of oxytocin, that love hormone, is super important as well. So what they found out from the results were that if you tell a story rather than just giving information, there's an increase of 20 to 40% of understanding and retention of the audience. So if your nonprofit is trying to, make sure that people understand what you're about and then remember it, telling a story will help you do that. So I like to say that story matters and the science proves it. And so I like to give a little action step, real simple, tell more stories. But there's a problem, unfortunately, for all of us. And I want to ask you, are you suffering from a pandemic? Anyone out there? Well, I would actually argue that we're all suffering from two other pandemics. Not Corona, but we're all experiencing two pandemics. Infobesity and short attention spans. So let's start with infobesity. I love that word. I wish I had coined it, but I did discover it. It's another term for information overload. So every year there's a company that puts out what happens in an internet minute. And you can see there's a lot there. So I'm going to break down some of those for you. So in 1 minute on the internet, there's over 1 million logins to Facebook. There's almost 5 million videos viewed on YouTube. We send almost 200 million emails, and there's over 4 million Google searches in 1 minute on the internet. So I don't even want to calculate how many has gone on for the last 17 minutes, but it's a lot of information. Not only that, but all the data that's been created, 90% of it was created in the last 2 years. So we are being bombarded every day, all day, with so much information. But then there's a second problem, which is I don't have a short attention. Oh, look, a kitten. Our attention spans continue to get shorter and shorter. So they did a study, and back in 2000, they reckoned that the average attention span of a human was 12 seconds. The attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. And I'm sorry to say, but the attention span today of a human is only 8 seconds. So just let that sink in. Human attention spans are shorter than that of a goldfish. So great, we know we got a big problem. So what do we do about it? How can we treat infobesity? How can we cure short attention spans? Because we're trying to reach and connect with our audience so they can know about your awesome nonprofit. Well, lo and behold, the answer is to tell a story. Because by telling a story, telling effective stories, you grab and hold people's attention. So that's kind of why story matters. But now let's talk what you really came here for, which is what's the story with visual? We all kind of have, I think, a sense that we know visual communication is important. But let's dig a little deeper. And I'm going to do something really crazy, and I'm going to tell you a story. And I want to know if anyone, just so you can put it in the chat, if you've ever heard the story of Coco Storvis. She's kind of a cult figure, and not many people have heard her, but her story is, I think, pretty compelling. Phil, when you're done, everyone, Dana, you'll all know Coco's story. And Coco's story is really, I think, a powerful way for you to think about communication in general. So Coco Storvis was a socialite in the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, and lived in New York City. And she was known as being the most connected person in the world. She knew presidents and senators and artists and everyone in between. And the reason that she was so well connected was because she was a master communicator. She knew a way to kind of connect with people. And the way that she was able to connect with people so well and communicate so effectively was because she was a master storyteller. And the way that she told stories really captivated people. She was also an artist, and she had a gallery down in Soho. And she'd have these amazing parties where she'd be communicating these stories with visual, even back then using multimedia, art, video, all this different kind of visual communication stuff. And as a result, everyone was enamored with her story. Everyone was kind of like fascinated by her. And she became the most connected person, was known as the most connected person. But you want to know what the most fascinating thing is about Coco's story from my perspective? To me, the most interesting thing about Coco's story is that, in fact, it is all a fabrication of my imagination. Coco does not exist. I'm sorry, you're very sad to hear that. She is, in fact, a representation of my worldview on communication. And I'll kind of explain, this is my worldview. I call this the rings of communication. So what are we all trying to do as humans in the world? We're trying to connect with people. And what do I think is the best way to connect is obviously through effective communication. And I hope I've pointed out that the best way to communicate is by telling a story. And finally, what's the best way to tell a story? Through visual. So if you take those words and you take the beginnings of each of them, that's how you come up with Coco Stories. Coco Stories. So when you're thinking about how to orient yourself in terms of the way that you're going to connect and communicate, remember Coco. So why is visual so important? Well, there's something that's kind of sad, and this is a generalization. You're going to hear some generalizations, and I hope you're okay with that. But there is also some data to back a lot of this up. But these days, and my children are certainly representations, we don't read. And if we do, it's in little sound bites. I read, but it's not what we are drawn to immediately. So we're not reading. But more than that, we talked about the brain. I'm going to ask you a question. How much faster does the brain process visual compared to text? So your brain has the capacity to process information. There's visual information and there's text information. How much faster does your brain process visual information compared to text? Feel free to have a guess in the chat. It's faster, much faster. 10 times, 1,000 times. Dana, Bev, you're both getting there. 78%. I don't know the percentage, but it's much more than 78% more. In fact, the brain can process visual information 60,000 times faster than text. 60,000 times. Yeah, wow is right. In fact, it only takes 13 milliseconds for the brain to process an image. 13 milliseconds. Now let me ask you a question about your organization. Do you want your message to be memorable? Anyone out there want people to remember their nonprofit, what they stand for, their mission, how important it is, all the people you help? I think so, right? So consider this. After 3 days, we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, and 30% of what we see. So now again, let me ask you this question. What percent do we remember of what we see and hear after 3 days? Feel free to take a guess. So I'll go back for a second. So remember, 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see. So let's see, Dana's guessing 70%. Dana, did you look at my slides? She may have looked at my slides. The answer is in fact 70%. So Dana, you get the gold star. Ed, you're close. 70%. So think about when you're sharing content, whether it's on social media, whether it's talking to someone, whether you're doing a presentation. If you include visual content where they're hearing, and this is the video piece, they're 70% going to remember that after 3 days. Oh, Dana, you're a cheater then. I'm glad you're teaching it, Dana. So now what I want to do is talk about, that's kind of like the why visual is important. Now we're going to talk about the what. So I'm going to go, there's lots of different content that you can share visually. I'm going to go over some of the kind of big ones. and then I'm going to give you a little exercise. I'm going to do a little exercise of how you can go from top to bottom. So some of these are pretty obvious. You can share some images, visual content, photos of cute little puppies or children. People love those, kittens. Images all the time. So when you're thinking about social, like, we just realized that you can process that image in 13 milliseconds. So super important to use images in the way you communicate with your audience. Now, this has become popular, and I think some people like them and some people don't, but there's this thing called memes, which is where you're taking a picture and you're adding a little text. So to meme or not to meme, that is the question. I'm a big fan of memes. Again, and people like them because they're using text and images. And the thing is that 60% of us are visual learners. So the fact that we can use visual to help people remember and learn things is really important. I'm a big fan of quotes, and I think that's another way, but quotes are text, right? Well, not always. You can make them visual. So design is thinking made visual. So when you're designing quotes, you could have just the basic quote, but I think sometimes you forget that you can dazzle it up. And there are some free resources, which I'll talk about in a bit, to do this if you're not a designer. I am not a designer. Thankfully, I have very good professional people on my team that can make things look pretty. But there are ways for us all to do that, whether you hire a professional or you do it on your own. There are DIY ways to create visual content. This has become one that I really like, and it's kind of, I guess it's a video, but it's kind of a tiny little video, and it's the kind of GIFs. Now, there's a controversy on whether it's called GIFs or GIFs. And I, for a while, was calling them GIFs. Now, I did some research on what it's called, and it's accepted both ways. But the person who created the term graphical interface format, graphical interface format, calls it a GIF. And I like that only because my name is Jeffrey with a G. So Jeffrey, GIFs, it makes sense to me. But whether you call it a GIF or a GIF, they're powerful and people like them. They're quick. We have that short attention span, don't forget. So a GIF is a way to do something visual with movement that's snappy that people can take and you can communicate very quickly. Then, of course, there's video. We do video. We love video. And again, I think there's a power in video, whether you have a professional videographer come and produce a video, brand video, which we do, or it's your little iPhone videos that you do to share what's going on. They're both really powerful and should be used as more. However much you're doing of any of these, I'm hoping you're going to do more of them when we're done. And then, of course, animation. Well, not of course to me, because we do a lot of animation, and I love animation. And it's another powerful way. What's nice about animation is you don't have to worry about lighting. You don't have to worry about someone behaving or not behaving. It's ways that you can communicate almost anything, and it's become very popular. Now, I would just warn you that when you do animation, there's lots of different styles, and sometimes you'll get people who seem, oh my God, you can do it really cheaply. And I would also say you get what you pay for. So just be careful when you're using animators, because some of them are doing them from custom images and some of them are doing them stock. And it's really about how you tell that story. And I actually want to make this point. I'm talking about the power of visual communication, which I am passionate about. But that doesn't say that I don't respect and believe in the value of words. I do. Words are critical. When we go and create any kind of animation, or we're talking about a video, or we're talking about crafting any kind of social post, where do all these ideas start from? Well, they usually start with a script or some sort of text, something where you have the concepts written out. So I don't want you to go away and think, okay, I'll never write another blog, because blogs are important, especially for SEO. And I also think I would like to say, you have to figure out what you are good at. So if your organization has someone who's a great photographer, use them. If you have someone who's a great writer, don't have that person start taking video. or at least have them do it, dip their toe. But I think you always want to play to your strengths, and that's why it's important to use all of these things, but use it all. It all can help tell your story. I think that's why I started with stories, because I want you to think in story. How can you communicate your message, those points, in a narrative form? And then think about, okay, how can I do it in a visual way? Because visual is going to be the most powerful way to capture people's attention, to get them to remember what you're talking about, and to engage them. And ideally, I always talk about the fact that content is king. That's this expression we always hear. And I've added a second piece to that, which is, who's the queen? And we know that the queen runs everything, right? So the queen is engagement. So content's great. Go and create all this content. But if you don't engage your audience, then it hasn't been effective. And so remember the queen. Content's king, but without the queen, stuff doesn't get done. Nobody cares. The king is just on his mighty throne. The queen's the one who gets stuff done. So you need the queen to engage with people. So I'm going to leave you with a question, which is, we all know the expression that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Have you all heard that? What's a video worth? Anyone want to have a guess in the chat? So Gartner Research actually has a number. So a research firm has come up with a number for what a video is worth. Picture's worth 1,000 words. What's a video worth? 2,000 words? 3,000 words? Everything. I think so. But they actually quantified it. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. A video is worth, hold your breath, you're waiting, you're holding. I forget. You don't want to know. Should I just leave now? You're gonna be like, I need to know what a video is worth. So a video is worth 1.8 million words. So I don't know why I'm talking. I should just play the video. But again, it demonstrates how powerful videos are. And I mean, I know I work in video and that's what I do, but the reason is because I believe so powerfully in how it can help engage people. And I love words, I do. I want to give you a little example of how you can take some content you might have from what form it might be in and how you might change it to be more visual. So here's an example. This is a real life example. I wanted to share the different services that we offer. So here it is. How can we help your business? We do logo design and infographics and animations and that video. Really compelling stuff here, right? Chock full of stuff. If I were to post this, share this with people, they're going to read it, right? Because we love to read. We love to read. We all do love to read. But just compare this to this. This is a little infographic, which all of a sudden I would argue, wow, that compared to this, there's a big difference. You've got the visuals. We're interpreting those visuals in 13 milliseconds. So rather than having to read through, our brain is processing these 60,000 times faster than if I were to read all that text. So again, you can think about taking points that you want to share with your audience, data points that are important, and crafting them into a story, and then creating an infographic to make them more powerful. And then this is hot off the press. Literally, I decided to do this for all of you because you're so wonderful. I wanted to see, well, what if I was going to make this kind of an anime video? So I got this from my animator literally this morning. It's not perfect yet, and it needs some music and things like that. But I want to at least show you how I take something, have some fun with it, and give you a little idea of like, this is kind of an animated gift extended. But so here's the stuff we do. So there's my little purple dot. I'm all about 9 dots. We do graphics. We do infographics. Love to do data visualizations. We do drone video. I just had to include it because I love drones. So we can help and take things from aerial perspectives. We do videos and video editing. We can take existing stuff. And of course, we do actual filming, or we can come and record stuff. And we love animation, but it's all really about visual. So there's my little animation. Okay, so hopefully by now you've had a sense of the power of visual and how it can help your nonprofit to really communicate and connect with your audience. So I'm going to share some tips so that you can, like, tangible things you can think about to be better at it when you start to do it. So let's start. So the rule of thirds is a rule that came from photography, and it's useful to use in how you construct your images, video. If you'll notice now, I'm using the rule of thirds in where, if you look at my video, I'm not here dead center, I'm just here, because our eye is drawn to those lines. And so the idea is that whatever the focal point of your visual content is, you want to have it at one of those purple dots and one of those crossroads. So I'll show you a couple examples of how you can kind of apply this. So here's our good friend Big Bird. And so you can see, well, on a blank piece, Big Bird's right in that rule of thirds. But so if you see it, what it would look like in an image, so you have this beautiful, Big Bird went, on vacation. And you can see that in the image, Big Bird is now right in the thirds where you want it to be. How about Oprah? She's right where she's always where she needs to be, even if she's in the land of lavender. I have no idea why I decided to do this. I did this a while ago. But there's Oprah in lavender in the thirds. And I'm not a religious person, but somehow I thought, even, Jesus needs to be properly placed, even if he's, considering what's happened in the playoffs. He may have a job working. I'm hoping he'll come and join the Sixers and help us out. So there's Jesus in the thirds. And then again, just to give you an example of what this would look like in an ad. So here's a discount. Everything's 20% off. The person is right. You see her eye is right in that third. And that's kind of how you want to think about from the composition of your visual content. You want to try and think about things in thirds and make sure that you have that thing you really want, because our eye will be drawn to those thirds. So the rule of thirds, first kind of tip. The second one is a big one, and it covers a couple different things, which is consistency is key. And consistency, I would say, comes in two buckets. The first bucket is that if you're going to start posting quotes on your Instagram, and you post one week 1, and you post one week 2, and then it's week 5, 6, 7, 9, 50, and you stop doing it, well, not so consistent. And your audience wants to get to know when you're going to, have that content. And also it helps you to make sure. So when you have things like content calendars and tools to help you schedule things out, and there are tools like Hootsuite and TweetDeck to help you schedule it. So I always tell the story, there's an accounting firm that writes their blog for Thanksgiving or Columbus Day in January. Because guess what? Thanksgiving happens every day. We know exactly when it's going to be going forward. So you can actually create your, Thanksgiving post early in the year. You can schedule it out and have it just waiting. Now, you also want to make sure that you're consistent with what's going on. So while it's great to schedule things out, something may happen in real life and we need to address it now. And therefore, you want to make sure you don't avoid or miss out on the opportunities to share content when it's important. But the other part of consistency that I think is really key is about consistency of your brand. Making sure that all your content, from the words you use, but especially your visual brand, is consistent. And if you go and you look at people's Instagram, is a good place to look. Not everything's exactly the same, but there's a consistency to the look and feel of your brand. And if you haven't gotten sort of branding guidelines, I really recommend that, because that's telling whoever's helping you, what are the colors, what are the fonts. You want to be consistent in how you're sharing your message to people in a way that they will understand, and that's why, you look at big brands, they have a visual, they spend a lot of money creating brand books to create, what is it going to look like? What kind of images are we going to use? What kind of graphics are we going to use? What kind of fonts are we going to use? And you see the big brands do it well. You don't need a big brand to do that. Any company, any organization, and I think nonprofits in particular, want to have, it's a shorthand. Because we're such visual learners, you want all your visual to make sense so that when someone sees these visual cues, they will start to associate it with your organization. So that if your logo is blue and white, and then all your other stuff is orange and green and black on your website, you're going to kind of go, what? There's a disconnect. And people subconsciously will not like seeing things that are incongruent. So consistency is key for both your brand and consistency in terms of how you share content. Don't be afraid of white space. Again, I'm not a designer. And I think when I do design some things, I fall into the trap of trying to fill everything up, and it's not a good idea. And I think a lot of organizations that do their own design work fall into this trap. If you see flyers that have a million things on it and every little detail, it's not helping engage the person who's looking at that piece of content. So less is more. Let things breathe. You want to have space in your copy, in your images, to let people, so that if you're going to have, even if you see some of these slides, there's some, well, here, I'll go to the next one. So, I could have done a lot with add value. I could have filled up the whole thing with value. But see how clean that is? Isn't that just a beautiful little slide? Lots of white space. We like white space. It enables, the contrast also enables the important piece you're trying to communicate to pop. So that's why also you see certain things where there's lots and lots of colors. Or if you do everything black and white except for a pop of purple, I love purple, the purple pops. And so whatever your brand color is, if you have, things going and then all of a sudden, poof, people then again, it's appealing aesthetically, and it helps people get to know, oh, everyone who knows me a little bit knows I am obsessed with purple. I am all in on purple, down to my water bottle and my watch. So I am the purple people eater, I like to tell people. But whatever it is you're going to do, you want to own it. You want to go all in on your brand and be consistent in terms of the branding. Whole other conversation between brand and branding. But for now, we're talking about branding, the look and feel of what your organization, how it represents itself visually. So don't be afraid of white space. Add value. So it's great that you want to share something about your company, but I'm going to share with you something. Do we all know the most popular radio station in the world? WIIFM. WIIFM. What's in it for me? So you can have all these great things you want to share about your organization, but unfortunately, no one cares what your nonprofit does necessarily, and I don't mean that. No one cares what a company can do. They care what that company can do for them. It's human nature, I'm afraid. Now, we are all human beings and care about things, and so if you have a nonprofit that's doing good in the world, what's in it for me is that I can feel good about myself. I can contribute. I can make a difference. So it's not that it has to be something selfishly for me, but you have to appeal to the audience. And so when you're creating anything, but in visual as well, what's in it? What am I getting out of this experience of looking at your ad, of looking at your video? Why do I care? You have to think about the audience and why they care. This last piece of advice is meant to be a tip on overall with any of your content. And it's a process. And I think that's the thing. There's no magic wand that all of a sudden you do this one thing and then all of everything's wonderful. It's also, I think, it's great to look at what your competitors are doing and what other organizations are doing and seeing what's working for them. And go, oh, they're using memes. Let me start using memes. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. And even though something may be popular, it may not necessarily be right for you. So being consistent with your brand. But this is the process I share with people, which is content and marketing is an art and a science. And the science part requires experimentation. So maybe you start sharing memes and seeing what the reaction is. Is it engaging people? And if it isn't, one of two things. It either is not connecting with your audience because they don't like memes, or your meme isn't very good in connecting with them. So you have to consider the content itself and the audience. Always consider the audience. And what I would say is, I teach at Temple and I teach my students the 11th commandment. And if you remember nothing else, remember the 11th commandment anytime you're creating visual content, anytime you're creating any content, which is know thy audience. And it goes back to what's in it for them. Know thy audience. What's in it for them? What do they care about? Because when you start with what they care about, then they're going to engage. So you're going to experiment and you're going to share things, and then you're going to measure. What was the reaction? We share these things, and it can be everything from the type of content to when you post it, to, you know, where you post it. So you want to look, you want to experiment, and then you want to measure, get the data, and then analyze what works, what's not working, what should we tweak, and then you adjust. And this is just kind of a marketing tool, but for everything you do, try things, you know, make sure you're consistent with what you're doing, but try some new things. If you haven't ever done a meme, maybe you try a meme and see if people might really like it. And then you're like, oh, maybe we should do more memes. But you're learning from those experiments to get better and better. And that's the goal, is always as you go from where you are to where you're going with your visual content, keep trying to push the envelope. I think organizations are conservative in general. And I'm not saying to start doing splashy, big, try and be funny or any of these things. Again, consistency and being aligned with what your brand stands for. But I feel like there's always room to fill a little bit of that white space with that pop. So what is your version of being able to pop and experiment with some things, with some of these visual things, with infographics, with memes, with GIFs? Try what, you know, again, you can try something on a kind of, and not necessarily upset the whole apple cart. You can try something, okay, Thanksgiving, we normally just write thank you, you know, happy Thanksgiving. Okay, well, maybe now you want to do a meme, or maybe you want to do a GIF. A GIF, see, I used to say GIF. But again, you know, see what might help. And looking around at what other people are doing is great, but it has to be true to your brand. And you have to recognize just because something works for Coca-Cola doesn't mean it's going to work for Apple, you know. And so your organization, and even within, you know, just something works for Coca-Cola may not work for Pepsi. You know, your audiences may be different. So even within the same industry, even with nonprofits, you may be like, oh my God, this nonprofit is killing it with infographics. And you may try some and either and they're not doing anything, like what's going on? Well, it may be the case that it's simply a matter of your audience isn't as comfortable with that, or, you know, they want it slightly differently. So maybe try it a different way and see. So experiment, measure, analyze, and then adjust. And again, I think the most important thing of all this is to remember Oscar Wilde, who said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. And I think not just personally, but as an organization, don't try and be somebody else. Be authentic. And I think nonprofits do a much better job of this than maybe some corporate organizations. But I think it's important to remember, what are you about, both in terms of your mission and your values, and use that in terms of the way that you express yourself in a visual way. Thank you. And now I believe it's that Q&A time. So there you go. That's my email if anyone wants to get in touch with me. In fact, that's all my social stuff. And I now turn it back to Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was awesome. You had me laughing, so that's good. That keeps people engaged. Usually some humor if you can do it well. Not a lot of dad jokes, right? So we'll wait. Dana says, great presentation, Jeff. So we will take questions. Like I said, if you want to raise your little hand, you can introduce yourself, introduce your nonprofit, and then ask your question. Or you can submit it, like I said, anonymously to the Q&A box. So we're just waiting for those questions. Oh, I have something. So Phil, I'm going to allow you to talk, and I'm asking you to unmute now. Can you speak, Phil? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So Jeff, great presentation, by the way. I find that people, how they visually communicate is how they audibly communicate. And I hope this doesn't sound negative, but sometimes it seems like people aren't great storytellers, and they can be very long-winded. And you mentioned the short attention span. Is storytelling something you can learn how to do well? Is there a technique to it for people to get better at it, or is it just is what it is?
No, I definitely think it's something you can get better at. I do believe that some people have kind of natural storytelling kind of performance things, whether extroverts like myself. It's interesting because in my second season of my podcast, I asked that specific question to every guest: is storytelling something that you're born with, or can you learn it? And I think I'd be out of a job in some ways if I couldn't help people learn how to do it. So yes, there are certainly ways to craft stories in a way that's going to be more compelling. I will share with you, I couldn't fit everything in this, but I'll share with you the tool that we developed. And normally I would have slides to share it, but I'll give to you. And if you want to reach out to me, I can go more detail. But I created something called the Story Pad. And one of the ways that you want to think about story is with the 3-act structure: beginning, middle, and end. I've been doing it since Aristotle came up with it in 350 BC. It's how we like to things. It's how movies work. And generally speaking, the 3-act structure is what's going to work for people. So what I always think about is, so the Story Pad, when you're communicating from a business in particular, the PAD is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the P of Story Pad stands for the pain or problem of your audience. So you start again with them in mind. So start with what, and you'll see this, are you having trouble with, your financial literacy, or, are you having trouble with, do you have a leak? Whatever it can be. If you start with the pain of the person that you're trying to reach, to engage them straight away. So that's the PAD, is the pain or the problem that your audience has. The A is the answer or the solution that you provide. So you've got a leak? Well, I'm Joe's plumber and I can help you. And then the D is the difference it makes to them. So guess what? You've got a leak. I'm a plumber. I'll come fix it. And the difference is you won't flood. So again, PAD, problem, answer, difference it makes. So I use that. It's keep it simple. Don't try and overcomplicate it. Start with what is it you're trying to, how do you help your audience? So start with their problem, share with them how you can help them, and then share with them how it's going to impact either their life or their business. So that's one of, a variety of ways. But yes, I think storytelling is something you can definitely work better at. And I think you need to, again, chunk it down and have clarity. Stories don't just happen. I think we see these amazing storytellers often and go, oh my God, they're so natural. A lot of work, the really good ones, practice. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of putting in the work to tell that great story. So I think one of the things is that we think, oh, storytelling is something you're good at, or is easy because we can all do it. But to do it really compellingly and effectively takes some work.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil, for asking your question. I'm going to disable your now. And then I do have another question here in the question box, Jeff, so I will ask that. Would you please share a real life example that illustrates how to effectively measure audience engagement?
So I work in social media a lot, and that's, I think, one of the simple ones, because a lot of people are looking for, how do you measure social, your investment in the social media, how do you measure it? And it's one of the things that's been happening for a long time. And you're looking at what in marketing we call KPIs, key performance indicators. And I would say one of the things you have to understand about measurement is, before you start to measure something, you need to know what your objective is. Because if you don't know whether you're getting close to the objective, then you won't know what to measure. But the simple things in terms of engagement, when you're looking at social media, there's things, what are you trying to get the people to do? So the simple things that you can do in terms of, and whether it's a landing page or it's a social media post, do people like it? Do people share it? Do people comment on it? Did they click when they wanted to click? So when we do some campaigns, we'll have, you'll see things where they have codes to purchase something or to get in touch, use this code. Those are tracking measurements, so that when, if I'm selling my widget and I have a post, an ad with saying, hey, use, code, 2020 plus, when then I can track that ad directed that person to purchase. So there's, the good news is with digital marketing, there's a lot of tracking and analytic tools, both in all the social media. So it's a matter of knowing what you want to track, what matters. So I'll give you one example on social media. So if your objective is brand awareness, get people to know, you might measure the impressions that ads have or a post has, as opposed to clicks or comments or likes. If your objective is to convert more people to buy your service or your product, then impressions may not be a good, you don't care how many people see it. You want them to take some action, click here to buy, click here to learn more, those things, so that those actions are what you're going to figure out is driving the objective you are. So I think, again, you have to be clear on what it is your objective is. And then again, with any piece of content, what is the action you want the person to do after they consume that content? We do a lot of animated videos, and that's why we have call to actions. Actually, not just in videos, but in everything, which is, okay, when I ask people, after someone watches your video, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to share the video? Do you want them to click through? Do you want them to call you? You need to be clear about what that call to action is, and that's what you're measuring to see if it's effective. So, and I hope that answers the question, but basically you need to figure out what is your objective, and then what are the KPIs that you can use to determine whether or not you're being successful. And again, you want to do it over time. I think one of the things is people look at analytics in this short amount of time and they go, it's not working. But you have to do it over, at least I say any marketing thing you should do 3 months to make sure to have some benchmarks for how it works.
Okay, Jeff, well, we're almost at 9 o'clock, and I see mostly all praise more than questions, and people are going to start following you and all of that. So that's good. So now that they have your information, I'm sure you could ask questions to Jeffrey offline. So
I'm happy for anyone to get in touch.
Yeah, unless there's one last thing you have to add to end the presentation, then we can probably finish up.
I add where I start, which is with a thank you to all of you for your time and attention. Nicole, thank you so much, and to the Chamber for giving me the opportunity. I am passionate about visual communication and storytelling. And so if I can help anyone, I'm always happy to have that conversation, to ask me a question, and I will share what I can officially or unofficially.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So I am going to close our program today. We are going to be sharing the recording with the attendee list and things after the event. And once again, thanks again for your time. And you guys can reach out to me at nstevenson@mlcc.org at my email address if you also have any questions. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great weekend.